Hello everyone, welcome to the EkhartYoga YouTube page. My name is Rose. Today we are going to do an in-depth tutorial on child's pose. Seems relatively simple, most of us are familiar with it, but there are little ways in which it can be slightly uncomfortable and lots of modifications that we can use to help it feel even better for us. So as you can see, I am surrounded by props. That's because we are going to explore lots of possible variations to help you feel better in this shape. But we'll begin with a little general outline. So child's pose, or Balasana, is a calming pose which is supposed to feel grounding, where your attention can draw inward. So in the basics, it looks more or less like this. You can come into the pose from a tabletop position, so from hands and knees, bringing your big toes together. Your toes are untucked, so the tops of the feet are on the floor. And then you're going to bring your hips back towards your heels. The knees can either be completely together or slightly apart, but we'll talk about that more in a little bit. And then your arms can either reach out in front of you or back by your side. So here you'll see in my body that my forehead is resting to the ground and my hips are resting to the heels, and the tops of my feet and lower legs are more or less flat, which is what makes this a relatively comfortable pose for me. However, there's lots of ways in which that might not be the case for different body types. All of our bone structures are different naturally, and so that means that sometimes it can be slightly uncomfortable or even not possible to lie in that full pose. So let's work through some of the modifications from our feet all the way to our head. First of all, if you notice that the tops of your feet, your ankles or your knees hurt, maybe you're more like this, where the tops of your feet don't like to be flat on the floor, then we need to add a little bit of support underneath the ankles. What you can use for that is, for example, a rolled up blanket or a towel. So here I have a rather thick blanket, so I'm not going to roll it up all the way, but you can take whatever piece of fabric that you have, roll it so it's an appropriate height for the distance that you have between your ankle and the floor, and then you're going to place that right underneath where your ankle would be. So taking a little moment to figure it out, untucking the toes, and then seeing how that is. So you give it a go. If that is too much, you can always unroll the blanket a little bit. If it's not enough, then of course you roll it up a little bit further. So here you can feel already that you're taking some of the pressure off of your ankle joint, making it easier to stay here. If it's your knees that are hurting, another option would be to take that same blanket and, rather than having it as a roll, taking it as more of a square position, so that you can then bring your knees on top of that square, untuck your toes, so your toes would be hanging off the edge. So you have to sort of set it up so that it's appropriate for the length of your legs. And then you can be resting right here. And again, you've taken a little bit of the pressure off of the ankle, because the ankle is resting on the blanket and the toes are on the floor. And you've added some extra padding for the knees. Then another thing that we see quite regularly is that in the child's pose, our hips might not want to reach the heels. So we quite often see something like this. So the hips don't go down all the way. This could be to do with the way that your hip joint is naturally rotated, the way that it's naturally shaped. It could be to do with any tension in the lower back. But we don't want to be uncomfortable hovering here. So different options. You could take a pillow. This is a relatively thin pillow, but it could be however thick a pillow you need, and place that underneath your hips, seeing if that does the trick, if that works. You could do the same with a bolster, so a bigger pillow like this, having that underneath your hips. Or you can also take a block, and then you're going to have to place it in between the feet and resting your hips on there. Again, using as much support as you need to make it a height that's accessible and comfortable for you. Another option that happens is that our head might not want to reach the floor. So we might be somewhere here naturally due to how our spine is shaped, maybe any tension we're holding on to. Can be lots of different reasons. Different options depending on how far down your head does reach. You could either, for example, stack your fists and rest your forehead on your hands. Your hands can also be flat if you're relatively close to the floor, or you can place a block right underneath your head, even a block and a bolster right underneath your head. So in general, for everybody, this type of variation where you have a bolster between the knees that you could rest your head on like so, is a nice way to have it be a little bit more restorative. It's a bit more comfortable. You really don't need to carry your body weight like that in any way. You're letting yourself just drop down into the support of the cushion and be nice and comfortable here. Then we also have arm variations. So classically, our child's pose might be like this, with our arms backward and our palms usually facing up, depending on your shoulder joint. However, if your head doesn't naturally reach the floor, this can cause a feeling of uncomfortable forward pressure. You can also reach your arms out in front of you. Here you can even add a heart opening variation by taking your palms together and bringing your thumbs more or less to the back of the neck or the head so you feel a stretch along the front of the chest. Or, to turn even more inward, a little variation that you can take that might feel good is to actually thread the hands backward between the feet. So you would need to separate the feet and separate the knees a little bit. And then you can reach your hands backward underneath the hips. Sorry, my microphone is getting in the way of me putting my head to the floor, but you would relax your head down to the floor and be here. So then finally, we also have the positioning of the knees. If you take your knees completely together and then fold forward, it creates a rounding in your spine because you have to fold over the thighs. This can feel good if you enjoy stretching the back in such a way, and if it feels good to you, then you can of course be right here. However, if this feels like too much rounding in the back, or perhaps for people who are pregnant, or if in general for your body it's not comfortable to be with your belly pressed up against the thighs, you can take a wide-legged child's pose. Wide-legged can mean anything from the knees separated just a bit, or you can have your knees all the way out wider than the mat, and then coming forward just like this. So what you'll see here compared to the last one is that now my back is able to be much longer, even perhaps a tiny bit of a heart opener here, because I can now let my chest sink to the floor in between the knees, which is of course not possible if my legs are there instead. So again, all these different options to play with. If this is a pose that regularly comes back in the yoga poses or yoga classes that you take, which for most classes it will be, it's really worth it to play around a little with the shape, see what feels good to you, and then feel free in whatever class to modify child's pose in whichever way feels best for you. So remember, for more restorative style, we can use the bolster, and here you can really be for a few minutes at a time. You can use your blankets, your pillows, your blocks. The most important thing in yoga is not that you get a super specific shape, but is that you are able to practice the shape in a way that's supportive for you and your body. So if you enjoyed this class, feel free to check out the class suggestions linked in the top right-hand corner or in the suggestion box down below. Please like and subscribe, and hope to see you very soon.